Hi, and welcome everyone, and welcome to this session where we have a very hot and interesting topic on the agenda for today, and a good friend and very capable speaker as the host of this session. So please join me in welcoming Daudi Mugabe, who is the General Secretary of the CX Association in Uganda. And this is very relevant for several reasons. First of all, Africa is a hotspot on the global map of experience management. Uganda is driving this agenda together with some other regions and economies on the continent. And Daudi is not only a leading member of the CX Association in Uganda, but also a director on the board of the Customer Institute. We at the Institute bring many of the African associations together and give them their own sections within the global CX community, as well as do whatever we can to support, following our motto of creating a rising flood that brings all boats up when it comes to excellence in experience management. So with that said, Daudi, we're extremely excited to have you today. Let's kick it off. This is over to you. The stage is yours to talk to us about CX on the African continent.
All right. Thank you very much, Stefan. Could you just confirm to me if my presentation is visible?
It is visible, and it has this wonderful Customer Institute red all over it. Thank you for that.
Okay, I've changed slides. It's now showing the overview. Can you confirm if that's the slide you are seeing as well? Okay, fantastic. So this is the overview of my presentation today. I'll try and manage the presentation in a way that we have some time left over for a Q&A, because I know after I'm done presenting, there'll be quite a number of questions, especially about the forum that took place in Kigali. So this is an overview, an area view of what we're going to discuss today. I'll start off by sharing a little bit about the association where I belong. That's the Customer Experience Association of Uganda. That story will shape the insights in what other associations are like, or other associations that are information in terms of what the challenges are and where they are in terms of their maturity. We'll then look at the current Africa CX Association landscape. In other words, what does that look like as of right now, 2025? What challenges are these associations facing? And then insights from the CX Leaders Forum in Kigali. Finally, a proposal from the Federation of African CX Associations, and that was a federation that came about from the Africa CX Leaders Forum. And then lastly, we'll have a conclusion as we wrap it up. So to begin, I mentioned that I am a member of the Customer Experience Association of Uganda. Now, some of you who are eagle-eyed might notice in that picture a gentleman called Ian Golding. Just a disclaimer, he is not a member of the Customer Experience Association of Uganda. That is just a picture where he was a keynote speaker at our CEO breakfast, where we had the CEOs in the room and we had an opportunity to talk to them about customer experience and why they must consider it as one of the key discussions in the boardroom. So he was a key speaker there. He is not a member. Just want to put that on the record. So the Customer Experience Association of Uganda started on WhatsApp, I would say. It was registered officially in 2023, but I would say unofficially, it began around April 2023. So what happened was a group of us started interacting with one another, and through platforms like the ICX Kenya Association. So ICX Kenya is the professional association of customer experience professionals in Kenya, and they do have events quite frequently. They've been around for about 11 years, and a couple of us would attend their events. And so from those events, we were inspired to start our own association. But as that was happening, I, on the other hand, was carrying out interviews, and I've interviewed Stefan. I've also had Alf on my podcast, and as well as a number of individuals in this particular picture here. So as we were having those discussions, they said, why don't we have some sort of association? I've noticed what you're doing on the podcast. I've heard of people going to ICX Kenya. Can't we put something together? And so the task then was to find individuals who are practicing customer experience, because if you go on Google and type in customer experience professional in Uganda, at the time you wouldn't get any results. So what would happen was my podcast was, can I say, a magnet for people who are practicing customer experience in Uganda. And so associations such as ICX also attracted us. And so together we formed a WhatsApp group, which eventually evolved into us starting and registering our company. And then that evolved into us getting in touch with Stefan and onboarding us onto the Customer Institute platform. Although not everybody has done that. A few of them are struggling to do that because they aren't familiar with the platform and they're not quite sure how to navigate it. But it's a learning lesson for us. At the moment, we are 30 members in total, and we have 2 members who are certified customer experience professionals. That is Charles Hedgeman and Joanne Tabade, the tall lady there in red that makes me look like a dwarf. So those are the 2 members that we have who are certified CCXP professionals. And we went ahead to partner with CXPA as well as the Customer Institute. So we have a quite fond relationship with those 2 bodies, and they do guide and help us. I say this because this story is not very different from what other associations are going through. And when I had a chance to engage a few people in Rwanda, they too had similar challenges in terms of, I am a CX professional, but who else is a CX professional? And so you don't know exactly where to go to do this. It's only at events that you figure them out, or maybe if you connect to them on LinkedIn. And so when I get to the challenges section, that's one of the challenges that these bodies face. But we as CXA Uganda, that's who we are and that's what we do. And many of our members are not just active on the CXA Uganda platform or association, we're also active in other spaces. Quite a number of them are have board member roles on CXPA. I myself am a board member on the Customer Institute, and a few others are board members on other platforms that are CX related. So we have a very strong professional association that has members recognized both locally in Uganda as well as outside the country. But what does the landscape look like on the continent? Africa has 54 countries. And I recall there's a time I was engaging with Stefan, we're looking for associations to onboard to the Customer Institute. And with my research, I barely found any. In fact, I had 7 registered on the Excel sheet that I had. I engaged Martina to help me. She did her research as well. And we couldn't find anything. And indeed, my assumption at the time was that perhaps these entities just don't have an online presence, but they do exist. But the fact is that there are only 8 registered customer experience or customer related associations on the continent. And those include, in Cameroon, we have the Cameroon Association of Customer Experience Professionals. In Ghana, we have the CXP Ghana. Those are, I'm happy to report, are very interested in joining the Customer Institute. In Kenya, we have ICX Kenya, or the Institute of Customer Experience. Those are onboarded to the Customer Institute. And South Africa, we have the Customer Experience South Africa. In Uganda, as I had mentioned before, we have the Customer Experience Association of Uganda. In Zambia, we have the Chartered Institute of Customer Management. In Zimbabwe, what they have there is a Contact Center Association of Zimbabwe. They don't have a Customer Experience Association. And in Egypt, they have the Customer Experience Egyptian Association. A fun fact about Egypt, and this I learned while I was at the conference, when the gentleman was explaining how they formed the association, not too different from myself and the CXA Uganda. They started on a WhatsApp group, and one thing led to another. And if I quoted him right, he mentioned that they have 2,500 members. Hello, Stefan, can you confirm if I am on? I hope I have not been disconnected.
You're still on. You're still good.
All right. Fantastic. I was right there. Yes, so they have 2,500 members. And so what this shows you is that there is a huge variation in terms of the maturity and membership. based on the number of associations that we have on the continent. So far we have 8, and I'll touch on this later on as I go on in the presentation. So what are some of the challenges that prevent these associations from being formulated? Why so few? I can speak to my personal experience as well as the experience that I've had with these associations in terms of their formation. As I mentioned earlier on, the first step is finding peers to connect with and formulate these bodies. There isn't a database of customer experience professionals, and in many cases you'll find that in institutions that have somebody practicing CX, it's not necessarily a designated role. It's under marketing in most cases, or they simply have a customer care desk or a service center. And so they don't have designated customer experience professionals. So when it comes to formulating such bodies, it becomes a bit challenging because you need a critical mass for your organization to have some sort of momentum and for it to be viable. And so that's the number one stumbling block. The second is the lack of expertise or knowledge on how to set up an association. I'll use our example. So we overcame the hurdle of finding the members, but the next step was a challenge. What do we register the association as? What sort of memorandum and articles of associations do we put together? What sort of framework does the committee or the board have? What does that look like? What are the administrative costs of running an association? All these are things that we had no clue on. And because we are full-time employees, there was a lot of paralysis analysis. So we would brainstorm, have a meeting, and then not act on it. And months would go by, we have another meeting, brilliant ideas, and then nothing. And so that also stagnated our progress in as far as formulating the association was concerned. What I would like to say, though, is that customer experience is a very unique profession in that there is a lot of support from colleagues that are practicing this particular field. And we had a lot of support from ICX Kenya. They really shared their story with us and they supported us and they told us it's not going to be pretty, it's going to be very ugly. What you have to do is start. Don't worry about it being perfect. We know you have this brilliant vision of what your association will look like and the brand logo and what the events will look like. But they say just put that in the bin, just start. That's the most important thing. And so that helped us to get off the ground. And I'm happy to say that we haven't looked back since. The other challenge that associations face is few organizations have these CX roles. I mentioned that those few that have the roles, it's difficult to find them, but the roles themselves don't exist. You'll find that somebody handling CX in an organization doesn't have a CX title. I'll actually use myself as an example. I work for a statewide insurance company, and I am in charge of the marketing as well as the CX. But if you see my title, it says Corporate Affairs Manager. That doesn't in any way, shape, or form rhyme with what I actually do. And so many organizations are structured in that way, whereby their organograms do not have a slot for someone designated to manage the customer experience affairs of the organization. And so that's one of the stumbling blocks. So you'll find somebody in marketing who has been given the challenge of handling CX. And so if they are to join an association, when that takes me to point number 3, they'll probably join the marketing association. And marketing in of itself has a component where they once in a while touch on customer experience. So you'll find that those individuals that want to create associations for customer experience, number one, they don't have the number of members to create the associations. Number two, the organizations themselves don't have those particular roles. And then number 3, there are already associations that are existing that have been running for years, where these people end up going and absorbing the would-be members of the customer experience association. So those are some of the challenges that hinder these associations from being formed. And not just that, even after the associations are formed, there are other challenges that come into play. For instance, defining a clear and attractive value proposition. One of our biggest challenges, and it still is a challenge to this date, is once somebody has paid their membership fee, what value are you going to give them as an association? And defining that in a way that also matches the fees is a bit challenging. So we've had quite a number of requests in terms of joining the association. Most people, especially in Africa, they want some sort of qualification that can help them advance in their careers. So a lot of them say, do you as an association have some sort of certificate that I can do so that I can show that to my employer, and then maybe that can get me a raise or get me a promotion. So those are some of the value propositions that members are sharing with us. And even when we engaged the CXP Ghana, that was one of the major talking points that they had. So on the continent, people want certifications. And when you present to them certifications like CCXP or CCCX, because of the price point, that becomes a deterrent. So we're trying to strike a balance on how do we get these people qualified and give them a sort of certification to validate their professional acumen, and how do we create that? Because not all of us are in academia, we can't necessarily do that. So it's a hurdle for some of us. And not just that, but also how do we help them advance their careers? Because as I had mentioned earlier on, some of these roles don't exist in these organizations. I'm happy to report that as time goes on, many organizations are starting to appreciate the value of customer experience, and they're separating it from marketing and other departments. But as of right now, generally speaking, it's not something that is looked at by the C-suite as something that's critical. And then, as I mentioned, establishing career paths. Whilst we were in Kigali, a lady asked a question. She's from Uganda, and she wasn't part of the association. She just found out about the event and bought it a ticket, and she went there, and she then discovered that, oh, there's an association in my country. I didn't know that. And the question that she asked was, I started out as an usher at events, somebody that would show guests in and things like that. I then got a job as a call center agent, answering calls for a telecom and eventually for an insurance company. I was then moved to customer experience. In other words, I am now the person that engages with clients once they have problems with their claims, or maybe once they walk into the office and they want to find out about our insurance services. And she said, I find customer experience is something that I want to pursue as my long-term goal, but I don't know what to study. When I go to universities and I look at the courses that they offer, I don't see anything about customer experience. So I just decided to do an MBA, a general MBA for now, because I couldn't find anything that was CX related. And that becomes a challenge for us as well as an association, because we are trying to show these people what the path looks like. And there are very few of us who are in the C-suite who have made it, quote unquote, all the way to the top. So there isn't a very clear path for some of these people that walk in to see the promised land, for a lack of a better word. If you're an accountant, you know that if I do this qualification, I get this number of years of experience, I'll be a CFO, and that's it. With our field, it's a bit ambiguous, and so even shepherding them in and managing them, it becomes a bit of a challenge, because you then have people at different scales in their careers, and you have one association. So if you have a webinar, what sort of guests do you invite? Do you invite somebody that's talking real CX in detail? If you do that, then you're alienating those that are at entry level. If you invite someone that is talking about the surface level items, then you discourage those that are already experienced. They don't see value in the association. So striking that balance has proven to be a bit of a challenge as well in terms of career guidance, mentorship, as well as value proposition as well in terms of what you present to the members. And then, of course, there is sustaining membership and funding, achieving visibility and legitimacy. One of our challenges as CXA Uganda was trying to establish credibility and legitimacy, because those on the outside looking in would wonder, what exactly is your agenda? What are you doing that maybe the marketing association can't do? Of what relevance are you? And slowly but surely, with some of the events that we're doing and some of our prominence on the continent, it's shining a light on why this association needs to be prevalent, especially in Africa, if I would say, for the government institutions, because those are the biggest service providers on the continent. And if they can buy into customer experience, then we will definitely have traction. So those are some of the challenges we have in terms of establishing credibility who is in your association, what do they do, what does your association do, what impact has it had so far, what is its agenda. So that sustainability, both in terms of membership, in terms of funding and credibility, seems to be a challenge. And then number 4, what fees to charge. I've already touched on that. You don't know how much to charge. For instance, at the Africa CX Leaders Forum, we learned that some associations pay their committee members, their president earns a sort of allowance. In Uganda, there is no such thing. We are volunteers, and what we pay for is sweat and blood. We pay the sweat and blood to work. We are not paid in any way, shape, or form. So it's interesting to see how different associations have different ways in which they manage this. And of course, by the time they're paying their president, then certainly their allowance or their membership dues are at a certain caliber. Now I want to get to the heart of the presentation. And this is pretty much what I wanted to touch on today, and that's the Africa CX Leaders Forum. This took place last week on Thursday and Friday. That was September 11th to 12th. This was in Kigali, in Rwanda, and it was quite the event. It had about 150 attendees from about 21 countries in total, represented by, I'd say, 6 associations. I mentioned there are 8 of them, but about 6 of them were present on ground. We were happy to learn that Rwanda had an association in formation. So they have a committee in place, and they're going to certify their documents and become fully registered this month. So at least we'll have 9 associations on the continent as of end of September. But the event was quite exciting. As you can see from the pictures, it's all smiles. We had some African dancers to kick off the event. As we were starting, there were loud drums. And before we knew it, there were these dancers that came into the room, and they just didn't go to the stage and dance. They danced around the tables. They pulled some of the people from the seats to dance with them. It was quite the experience to start us off with the forum, and quite unique, because some of us who are not familiar with the Rwandan dances, the traditional dances, it was quite interesting to see what they were doing and the meaning behind what they were doing. So as you can see, they have some pots on their heads. There are ladies there, but there were also gentlemen that came to dance with them. And this was all about some sort of bridal dance. I think the man had come to pick a wife from the land, and it was quite interesting. There's a picture there of myself smiling. I was the host or MC at the event, and it was quite nice. There's a picture of me down there, bottom left, trying to learn how that Rwandese dance is had. I stepped on a few toes, but I think after 30 minutes of practice, I got the hang of it. And another picture there of myself and the other MCs who were helping me to officiate the event. So it was a very colorful event, a 2-day event, which ended with us visiting the memorial, the genocide memorial, where we learned about the Rwanda genocide. It was a very somber and sobering moment to learn about the history. The way it's packaged is quite unique, where they take you through the events right from the very beginning all the way to the current day, and what Rwanda has done to put behind them some of this trauma, and what the government is doing to help their citizens cope, some of the initiatives in place. It was quite interesting to learn that bit about Rwandan history. So what did I take away from the event? The event, as you would expect, had quite a number of keynote speakers, quite a number of panelists. But what stood out for me were the commissions that were created. So CX Africa Forum was an event put together by a gentleman called Punsa. Punsa is from Cameroon, and he is the lead for an organization called CX Touchpoints. CX Touchpoints has a branch, or they have presence, is the word I'm looking for. They have presence in Rwanda, so they have CX Touchpoints Rwanda. So last year they were in Rwanda organizing a similar event at a very small scale, only for Rwanda. And this year around, they decided to invite all the CX African leaders. And whilst they were doing that, one of the the things that they did was to formulate commissions. So what Punsa did was to put together teams of people and ask them to research and do some groundwork on what CX on the continent looks like in these 6 different buckets. So these committees were put together I want to think in July or June, thereabouts. And between June and August, they were compiling presentations on each of these 6 topics. So there are 6 commissions in general. One commission was looking at the Africa Customer Service Week Guide. In other words, they looked at what we have Customer Service Week, International Customer Service Week, Customer Service Month. But as Africa, some of the themes that are chosen don't necessarily speak to us. So this commission was looking at what does that look like on the continental level? In other words, we as a commission going forward, are we in position to do some groundwork and then come up with themes that speak to us as a continent so that when we are celebrating Africa Customer Service Week, it is unique to the continent and it is very relevant to us as a people. That's what that commission was looking at, and they presented a report on that. There was another commission that presented on public sector CX governance, and basically this looked at a roadmap to embed citizen-focused practices into government services. So what they benchmarked was, what does CX in the different government organizations look like? What services are they rolling out? How best can we compile a blueprint for these organizations to look and learn? In other words, if in Uganda, getting your driving permit takes 30 minutes because of certain systems that you put in place, can we borrow that and take it to Kenya, to Rwanda, to Cameroon, and so on and so forth? So it's learnings from what governments are doing very well in their respective countries and trying to emulate that, because for several countries, many of the hurdles are the same. So if you can tackle one issue and overcome it in one country as a government and manage to have good service in that area, then why not do the same in another country? The third is the National CX Professional Body Framework, and this is the one that I'm going to focus on today. What this was looking at was, it was basically addressing the challenges that I mentioned earlier. Why do we have so few associations on the continent? What are some of the challenges that these associations are facing? And how can this commission help them establish? So let's say Malawi, for example. If we have one person that we are aware of in Malawi who says, oh, I am a practitioner of CX in Malawi, can you help me start an association? This CX professional body framework or commission would then help them and say, okay, we are going to try and find as many people as we know in Malawi that are doing CX. We have a template here for you. This is what your template would look like in terms of the board structure. This is what you need to have in order to register legally there. Ideally, these are the fees you need to have. This is the minimum value propositions that you maybe want to have for your members. Here are some international associations that you might want to affiliate with. We have contacts there. So basically helping them with all that, such that it's very easy for them to set up. That's what this commission is all about. And when we were in Kigali, as I mentioned, we noted that there were 8 associations, 9 if you count Rwanda Information, and Nigeria, which is a very prevalent country, and a country that had very many CX professionals at the forum, interestingly enough, does not have an association. But I think they were inspired and they resolved that when they go back to Nigeria, they too are going to form an association. So the benchmark was, we intend to have at least 20 African CX associations by the time we meet again in Kigali next year. The other commission was looking at a CX transformation framework for SMEs. We have so many SMEs in Africa. Uganda at one time was voted the most entrepreneurial country. Every individual in Uganda owns a business, myself inclusive. We all have businesses. We have jobs, but we have businesses. We like starting businesses. And many of those businesses, some of them grow, some fail. But as they grow, we wanted to empower these businesses with being customer-centric, because many of them are solopreneurs, they do everything themselves. Maybe they give you a good service because they are the ones engaging with you. But once the business grows and then they fall back, then it all falls apart. So this particular commission was looking at SMEs in particular and trying to come up with a framework that can guide them on learning how to become more customer-centric and what to incorporate in their small businesses to help them thrive. And then I mentioned a question asked by a lady who said, I don't know what to study for CX. And that's what this fifth commission was looking at. So there was a commission dedicated to studying and proposing a guide for customer service basic education at all levels, from tertiary level all the way to university, introducing an education system. For instance, if we learn about nutrition or history, why can't we have a subject or two about customer service, such that by the time somebody is going to graduate, they are aware that this is a profession that I can do. Career day, we want to have people in CX come and present what they do. CX is not something that you just do. Actually, there was a comment from one of the participants who said, somebody approached them and said, oh, I have a nephew and I wish you could find something for them to do in your organization. They're young, they're happy to do anything, even if it's customer service, even if it's that, you can give them that. It's okay, anything will do. And so that meant that in their mind, customer service was something that anybody could do. So it doesn't matter what it is, just give them something to do. Even somebody right from school can do it. So there's that lack of understanding and appreciation of what exactly CX is. And this particular commission was looking at how do we influence the education system? How do we have CX as something that is mentioned, something that is taught in our education system? And to answer the lady who had asked their question earlier, eventually to have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in CX that is not just CX for the sake of being CX, but CX infused with some of the lessons that we've learned that can then be supplemented by some of the certifications that are professional that we know about. And then the last one was the Africa CX Index Research. And this looks at writing white papers, doing in-depth research, surveys, and some of the insights that are specific to the continent. And what I would like to say about this is one of the presentations was done by, one of the keynotes, I should say, was done by a lady who is the group CX for a bank in Africa called UBA. And she was being pressured by her CEO to have a regional CX head. In other words, for East Africa, why don't you have one head of CX? Why do you have a CX head in Uganda, in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Tanzania? Why don't you just have one head that manages all those regions? And she tried to explain to them that you might look at it as just East Africa, but it's nuanced. What people in Uganda do and like is different from Kenya. It's different from Tanzania, and yet they're neighboring countries. Even the languages that they speak are different. For instance, if you are creating a software for these regions, in Kenya, you will have to have Swahili first and then English, because Swahili is more commonly spoken than English. In Rwanda, it's Chinyarwanda first and then French, and then maybe English. So those simple nuances, and then in Uganda, you have so many languages. So you might have English and then maybe a few other languages. So you won't just get something and just dump it in a region because you assume it is all the same. And so that's where this particular research comes in terms of helping us appreciate what it is that the continent looks like in terms of CX, in terms of the people, in terms of what they look for, and so on and so forth. Another simple example that would come to mind is you might assume that when it comes to a bank, people want self-service so that they can finish it as quickly as possible. Now, I'll tell you, in Africa, people want to talk to people. People want to chit-chat. So you might introduce that technology, assuming that you are enhancing the experience. And what, in fact, you're doing is degrading the experience because you've taken away the human element. They just want someone to speak to chat to. So those are just simple examples on what these commissions were doing. And at this juncture, I just want to dive into the National Professional Body Framework Commission. So as you can see there, this is a commission that had quite a number of individuals. They had a chairperson, a vice chair, an organizing committee, standards and certification leads, research and knowledge lead, advocacy and stakeholder engagement, a toolkit, and implementation lead. So for my presentation, I've borrowed 2 slides from their presentation to share with us here, just so we can appreciate what they did for their particular commission. And these commissions that I've spoken about it wasn't a one-off that they did their work and that's that. They are carrying on with their work. So a few KPIs were set for them on what they would accomplish before we meet again in Kigali next year. And the key milestone for this particular commission was to simply onboard an additional 11 associations, as well as fine-tune and refine some of those frameworks that I spoke about earlier on that can help them guide these associations as they are being formed. And in doing so, what they proposed was the formation of the Federation of African Customer Experience Associations. And what that is a Pan-African non-profit organization established to advance the customer experience profession across Africa. In other words, you have CXA Uganda, ICX Kenya, and so on and so forth. This would be an umbrella under which all those fall. And what this umbrella does, in terms of their vision, is to catalyze impactful customer experience practices across Africa by empowering professionals, shaping policies, and fostering innovation through unified national customer experience bodies. In other words, they leverage the CX bodies in the different countries to harness lessons, learnings that can then help the other associations across the continent to grow and develop. So studies, frameworks, lessons, experiences, you name it. And their mission, as I mentioned, is to anchor a Pan-African Federation of national customer experience professional bodies, empowering them through a collaborative framework to harmonize standards, develop world-class talent, champion customer-centric policy, and unlock transformative value for people, organizations, and economies of Africa. For instance, Daudi is in Uganda working for an insurance company. Through this federation, Daudi is able to learn about what CX in Cameroon looks like, not just in theory, but from first-hand information from people that are there on ground. He knows what the people there like, what they don't like. He has seen surveys from some of their reports. And so if Daudi is applying for a job to be a CX head in West Africa, he has a very good grounding. He's not going to gamble and try and export what he knows from East Africa to West Africa. This federation would be able to help them have the best footing that they can have through some of these learnings. And as I had mentioned earlier, this goes back to some of the value propositions that we as associations would now offer is, as an association member, you then tap into the resources of this Federation of Africa CX associations. So what else does the Federation do? The Federation model also balances national sovereignty with continental collaboration inspired by successful Pan-African professional bodies. And why the Pan-African Federation? Of course, professional mobility. I've just given a very simple example of that. A unified voice. We as African associations, through this federation, we want to influence our governments, like I had said earlier on, because those have the biggest impact. And if you have a unified voice like this, it is not far-fetched for us to have a seat at an event where the African Union, for example, is seated and make a case to them on what we believe our continent should do in order to improve the citizen experience. And so having a unified voice like this backed by data, it helps us move mountains. And so those are some of the dreams that this federation has. in terms of harmonizing standards across knowledge sharing. One example that I'll give, in Rwanda, we had a presentation from IREMBO, IREMBO. IREMBO is an initiative by the Rwandese government to digitize citizen services. So if I want to get a passport, driving any of those other official documents, a birth certificate, and so on and so forth, I just have to go online, and it's been simplified. And some of the challenges prior to this initiative were things like bribes. You would have to go a lot of paperwork, lining up. Somebody's frustrating you because they want you to give them a bribe before they can give you a service. And so all these challenges, the papers get lost, and so on and so forth. So IREMBO managed to streamline all that and digitize it. And so the citizens' experience in as far as getting some of these documents has been simplified, and they're very much happy with that. And so we are now learning from that, and we are benchmarking. So this federation would help get lessons from IREMBO, put it in a framework, and then share that with the rest of the associations or governments, and then we implement that. And that speaks to the knowledge sharing as well. So basically, the federation will build on proven models from established Pan-African federations in a variety of fields such as engineering, law, human resources, and so on and so forth. So finally, as I conclude, the learnings from the Africa CX Leaders Forum, specifically looking at the federation assisting the associations, was to grow the associations of the continent from 8 to 20 by August 2026. So that when we meet again in September, and just so you know, the next forum will take place in Kigali, Rwanda next year. It will be on the 16th of September 2026 to the 18th of September 2026. So it will be 3 days. This year we had 2 days, but we realized there was just so much value. We couldn't unpack everything. So we said next year we'll have 3 days. We committed to a date, that is the 16th, 17th, and 18th. And it's going to be much bigger than it was this year. We expect way more people. We expect more insightful studies and commission reports. There are other commissions that have been created as well. There is one for technology, as well as one for, I think it's research-based in particular. I'll need to verify those. So 2 other commissions were created in addition to the 6 that I've just shared with you, so that they can do some groundwork. And the long-term vision is to have a federation that basically represents the continents, leveraging the different associations from the different countries, as well as the practicing professionals on the continent to help out. So from our discussions in the forum, when we left, Nigeria showed interest in forming an association, Angola as well, and Tanzania. So those are the associations that were very interested in forming associations, of the countries that wanted to form associations, and this particular commission is going to help them with that. And of course, as a partner, the Customer Institute will definitely be on hand to support them and obviously onboard them to add value where they can, and to collaborate and build this network of CX professionals that we have here. So in a nutshell, that was the forum. And in a nutshell, that is what we have as professional associations on the continent. And with the remaining minutes, I see there are about 7 of them. I would like to hand back to our moderator, Stefan, and I welcome any questions or comments that you may have.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I have a
Thank
question.
you so much, Dodi. Go ahead, Alpha.
Yeah, so one way to listen to this is you were presenting about Africa to Africans, people on the continent itself. Another way to listen to this, and I guess the question that I have is, when you mentioned Pan-Africanism once or twice, do you consider the diaspora, or did anyone talk about the diaspora and what that could mean for the Confederation? Or connection thereof between, say, the diaspora and the continent itself?
Very, very good question, Alpha. I must concede that that did not come up in our discussion. Most of the presentation and discussions were findings and experiences from those who are practicing here on the continent. And thank you for raising that, because it's something that I'm going to share with the team to factor in as we build towards this goal.
Okay,
Good questions. Thank you very much, Alpha. Dowdy, this was an incredible insight into what's happening into the continent, in the continent, and hot off the press, what you guys discussed in Kigali. So with all of this still being materializing, did you get a moment to think about, spend some first brain cells on how we as a customer institute can support these initiatives? Because as you as a board member know, that's right up our alley in terms of the mission and vision we pursue. Support everyone who pursues excellence in experience management. Any ideas on your end?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the CCCX is a good one. It's something that has been well received, particularly in Kenya, as you know, Stefan, and in Uganda as well. Initially, people, well, let me just put it like this. Most professionals, even those that have been practicing for a long time, aren't aware that there are these professional certifications like CCXP or CCCX. They have no clue. They've simply been practicing and they didn't know that these exist. So one of the ways, particularly with CCCX, since it's a unique qualification that does not expire, that is one way to attract them. But even the resources that we have, as well as the platform that we have for the associations, that's a very powerful pool for these associations. In other words, as an association, once you're forming, there is an existing platform where you can establish your members and engage with them. And it also has a library of resources that you can leverage, not just for individuals on the continent, but even outside the continent. And even as the Customer Institute, this now strengthens our resolve to create that platform or section that we spoke about for the Federation or the African continent. They could share their resources on that platform and have their discussions on our platform. So our platform, I believe, is a very, very good selling point, because as you know, it's a huge barrier to entry in terms of the cost to have such a platform for an association that's starting out. But now that we are even growing into several associations, this would be a very good place for us to interact with one another.
I agree. I agree. When you talked about the federation and the idea of forming it to have an equivalent to the African Union on the customer experience management side, I was thinking that it would be quite helpful and doable on our end to create a section within the global CX community that's called African CX community, where we complement the country's association section with a Pan-African space where the federation can then run their business and their communication. So if you want to take that to the team and make them aware of all of these options being there and us being incredibly willing to help, I would highly appreciate it, because you guys are doing amazing work there. When you spoke about the roadblocks and difficulties in founding associations, I had to think back of us 8 years ago when the Customer Institute was founded. And Alpha has been on the board. Both of you, Amos and Dowdy, have been on the board. You remember how we swam against the current and built what we've built. So if we can make it easier for the associations being formed now, I think it would be very satisfying for all of us here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my takeaway from that is I will try and broker a meeting between the Federation leaders and us, just so we can have that discussion, because I noticed that we are partners with them. And so definitely that should not be a hurdle.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So much valuable insight. Any other questions from your end, Alpha or Amos?
Yeah, I would like to add to this. Congratulations, Dowdy. That was an amazing presentation. And it's really lovely to know so much is happening over there. I myself haven't visited Kenya, but my mother was born in Kenya. So I wish one day I will get the opportunity to visit. Well, the couple of things that you mentioned, I'm liking the fact that you're creating not just smaller groups which are tailored within the different country areas, but they're also that pan overview where everybody will sit together and share the ideas. And I really like the element of best practice by country and then using those and applying it to the other areas and countries. And I know there's a lot of cultural and I'm also Pakistani, so I know the way things are working in my country in Pakistan, and how you talked about bribery, and that's an important part with trying to operationalize and workarounds, and how do you make it all digital so people can't do that and manipulate people with the money that they don't have, or they want to achieve an outcome, and trying to build all that around that culture and area is going to be tough. I appreciate that, but you've made a start, and that's so good. Anywhere we can help, we're happy as a Customer Institute, and personally myself, because of my link as well with you guys. I would love to help as well anywhere I can. I know training is also important for you guys. So again, in Customer Institute, Stefan has an amazing CCX course. We also share our knowledge and experiences on LinkedIn as well as here. So happy to help there as well whenever you can. So congratulations. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Very good. So Dowdy, the conversation will surely continue within the community. Everyone who's listening to this conversation, you can chat with Dowdy within the community very easily. All of us are there. So reach out to him if you would like to find out more about what's happening in the on the continent, and obviously reach out to us if there's anything we can help you with, either Dowdy or any other director on the board. With that, I'd like to thank you for the work that went into presenting this session, the enthusiasm that went into presenting it, and the immense knowledge and motivation you're bringing to the continent, Dowdy. Thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Alpha. Thank you, Moose.